I stared at Marcus across our hotel suite, the honeymoon suite I'd paid for, and felt the same cold dread I'd felt the first time I lived this moment. Babe, I know this is terrible timing, he said, his phone still pressed to his ear, his hand over the microphone. But it's Sienna. She's in the hospital. I have to go back. 24 hours married. We hadn't even left for the Maldives yet. We were supposed to fly out tomorrow morning. And here he was, already choosing her. But this time, I had something he didn't know about. I had died before. Drowned, actually, in the bathtub of the apartment Marcus and I had shared for 5 miserable years after I canceled our honeymoon and spent our first week of marriage nursing his sick ex-girlfriend back to health. I'd lived through the affairs, the gaslighting, the financial abuse, the final betrayal when he pushed me just a little too hard during an argument and my head cracked against the porcelain. Then I'd woken up on our wedding day, 6 a.m., with my phone alarm blaring and my heart racing. I'd spent the past 24 hours in a fog of disbelief and terror, and finally, standing here watching him pack his suitcase with trembling hands and guilty eyes, a cold, calculated rage. "Okay," I said. Marcus froze. "What?" I said, "Okay, go to her." He'd expected tears. In my first life, I'd cried and begged and pleaded. I'd canceled the honeymoon, sent back the tickets, and flown back to New York with him on the first available flight. I'd sat in that hospital waiting room while Sienna milked a panic attack for all it was worth. And I'd let Marcus hold her hand and stroke her hair and whisper that everything would be okay. I'd been such a fool. "You- You're not coming with me?" Marcus looked almost disappointed. "No," I said calmly. "I'm going to the Maldives. Alone." "That's insane, Claire. You can't go on our honeymoon by yourself." "Watch me." I pulled my suitcase from the closet and began folding the lingerie I'd bought for him, silk and lace in colors he'd never appreciate. I'd be damned if I let them go to waste. "You booked your flight back yet?" No, but then go do that. I'm sure Sienna is just devastated that you're married now." His face went red. "This isn't about jealousy. She's sick." "Funny how she's always sick when you're happy." That landed. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he couldn't argue. Even he had to see the pattern, though he'd never admitted it. Sienna had an uncanny ability to have emergencies whenever Marcus achieved something. His promotion, his father's retirement party, our engagement, and now our wedding. In my first life, I'd believed him when he said she was just fragile, that she needed him because she had no one else. I'd been understanding, patient, self-sacrificing, and it had killed me. "I can't believe you're being this selfish," Marcus hissed. I laughed, actually laughed. The sound startled both of us. "Selfish? I'm going on a honeymoon that I paid for, to a resort I chose, on dates I selected. You're the one abandoning your wife of one day for your ex-girlfriend. But sure, I'm the selfish one." "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that." I zipped my suitcase closed with a sharp snap. "Go, Marcus, run to Sienna. I'll see you in 2 weeks." "Claire, 2 weeks," I repeated, turning to meet his eyes. "That's how long the honeymoon is. If you're not there, I'll understand what that means." I could see him calculating, trying to figure out if this was a bluff. But I'd learned something in death. Certainty was its own kind of power. I knew exactly how this would play out if I followed the old script. I knew that Sienna wasn't sick, just manipulative. I knew that Marcus would spend the next 5 years choosing her over me in 1,000 small ways until the final, fatal choice. So, I was writing a new script. He left 2 hours later, his suitcase half-packed, his face twisted with guilt and resentment. I watched him go from the window of our suite, feeling nothing but a strange, light sense of freedom. Then I called the airline and changed one of our tickets to business class, keeping the other reservation active. Let him wonder if I'd really gone. Let him squirm. I went to the Maldives. The flight was long but peaceful. I drank champagne, watched movies, and slept without the weight of Marcus's expectations crushing my chest. The resort was exactly as beautiful as the photos promised. White sand beaches, turquoise water, palm trees swaying in the warm breeze. I checked into our overwater bungalow alone. The staff tried not to stare. I could see the questions in their eyes. Where was my husband? Why was I here alone on my honeymoon? But they were too professional to ask, and I was too numb to care. I spent the first day sleeping and crying and sleeping some more. Grief was strange the second time around. I wasn't just mourning my marriage. I was mourning the 5 years I'd lost in my first life, the version of myself who'd been so desperate to be loved that she'd accepted crumbs. The second day, I woke up angry. I put on the white bikini I'd bought for Marcus and went to the beach. I swam in the impossibly clear water. I ordered fruity drinks with umbrellas. I got a massage that made me feel like a human being again. And that's when I saw him. He was sitting at the beach bar, alone, with a laptop open and a barely touched mojito sweating in the sun beside him. Dark hair, sharp jawline, expensive watch, tailored linen shirt rolled up to reveal tanned forearms. He looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne ad. He also looked exactly like Marcus. I froze, my heart hammering. Was I hallucinating? Had the stress finally broken me? Then he looked up, and I saw the differences. This man was older, maybe early 30s to Marcus's 28. His features were sharper, more refined. His eyes were a darker shade of brown, almost black, and they held an intelligence and intensity that Marcus had never possessed. He saw me staring and smiled. It was a slow, knowing smile that made heat rise in my cheeks. "I'm sorry," I stammered, walking over. You look like someone I know." "Let me guess," he said, his voice deeper and smoother than Marcus's. "Marcus Chen?" My jaw dropped. "How did you—" "I'm his brother, Damien." He stood, extending his hand. He was taller than Marcus too, I realized. At least 6'2". "And you must be Claire." I shook his hand automatically, my mind reeling. Marcus had a brother? In 5 years of dating and 1 day of marriage, he'd never mentioned a brother. "I can see the confusion," Damien said, gesturing to the seat beside him. "May I buy you a drink? I promise I'm not a creep. Just someone who also needed a vacation and happened to pick the same resort as my brother's honeymoon destination." "You knew Marcus was honeymooning here?" "I booked it, actually. Wedding gift." His smile turned sardonic. "Though I notice you're one person short. Let me guess. Sienna emergency?" I sank into the chair, my legs suddenly weak. "You know about Sienna?" "Everyone knows about Sienna. Well, everyone except our father, who thinks Marcus walks on water." Damien flagged down the bartender and ordered me something tropical and strong. "So he actually ditched you on your honeymoon?" "Day 1, I confirmed, taking the drink gratefully. "Hospital emergency. She had a panic attack." "Of course she did." Damien's jaw tightened. "That manipulative—" He stopped himself, took a breath. "I'm sorry, this isn't my business." "You seem to know a lot about it for it not being your business." "Marcus and I aren't close," Damien admitted. "There's some family drama, but I keep tabs on him, and Sienna's been a problem for years. I tried to warn him once that she was toxic, and he accused me of being jealous." He laughed bitterly. "Jealous? Of a woman who's made it her life's mission to destroy his happiness." I studied him over the rim of my glass. In my first life, I'd never known Marcus had a brother. Now I understood why. There was tension there, the kind of family rift that created permanent distance. "Why did you really book this resort?" I asked. Damien had the grace to look guilty. "Honestly, I wanted to make sure my little brother didn't screw up the best thing that ever happened to him. I've been watching from a distance, saw your wedding photos, read the engagement announcement. You seemed good for him, grounded, real." He met my eyes. "And if I'm being completely honest, I wanted to see if you were everything you seemed." "And am I?" "You're here alone on your honeymoon, drinking with your husband's estranged brother instead of drowning in your hotel room. So, yeah, you're exceeding expectations. I should have been offended. I should have made excuses for Marcus or defended my choices. But sitting there with Damien, basking in the attention of someone who actually saw me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, alive. We talked until sunset. Damien told me about the family business, Chen Technologies, a cybersecurity firm that his father had built from nothing and that both brothers had been expected to join. Marcus had chosen marketing and joined the company's public relations division. Damien had gone into development and operations, eventually taking over as CEO when their father retired. Marcus resented it, Damien explained as we moved from the bar to a beachside restaurant. He thought he should be CEO because he's charming and good with people. But Dad wanted someone who understood the technical side, who could make hard decisions. Let me guess, Marcus accused you of stealing his birthright? He didn't talk to me for 2 years. Damien's expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the old hurt underneath. He said I manipulated Dad, played politics, sabotaged him. Never mind that I have a PhD in computer science and he barely graduated with a business degree. I thought about the Marcus I knew. Charismatic, charming, but fundamentally lazy. He wanted the rewards without the work, the glory without the grind. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Damien looked at me for a long moment. Because you're not what I expected and because I think you deserve to know who you married. I think I'm figuring that out. The food arrived, fresh fish, grilled vegetables, rice pilaf. We ate and talked and laughed, and I felt the heavy weight I'd been carrying since my rebirth begin to lift. Damien was easy to talk to, sharp and funny, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. He asked about my work. I was a data analyst at a healthcare nonprofit and actually listened to my answers. He asked about my family, my hobbies, my dreams. Marcus had never asked about my dreams. When dinner ended, Damien walked me back to my bungalow. The moon was full and bright, turning the ocean silver. Thank you, I said as we reached my door, for tonight, for the company. Thank you for not running away screaming when you realized you were drinking with your husband's enemy. Are you his enemy? Damien considered this. No, but he thinks I am, which amounts to the same thing. He hesitated, then added, I'm here for another week. If you want company, platonic, friendly company, I'm usually at that bar around sunset. I'd like that, I said and meant it. He left and I went inside to a bungalow that suddenly felt less empty. I checked my phone for the first time since landing. 7 missed calls from Marcus, 3 voicemails, a dozen texts. I listened to the voicemails. The first was apologetic, the second was defensive, the third was angry. I skimmed the texts. Same progression. Sorry, then explanations, then accusations that I was being unreasonable and childish. In my first life, I would have called him back immediately, apologized, begged him to forgive me for being upset. This time, I blocked his number and went to sleep. The next few days fell into a pattern. I'd spend my mornings alone, swimming, reading, getting spa treatments. Afternoons, I'd explore the island or try new activities. Evenings, I'd meet Damien at the beach bar, and we'd have dinner and talk until the stars came out. It wasn't romantic, not exactly, but there was something there, a pull I couldn't deny. Damien was everything Marcus wasn't, thoughtful, accomplished, genuinely kind. He opened doors and pulled out chairs and remembered that I didn't like cilantro. He asked follow-up questions about things I'd mentioned days ago. He looked at me like I was fascinating. On day 5, he kissed me. We'd gone snorkeling and were sitting on the beach afterward, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I was telling a story about my first job out of college, something embarrassing involving a spreadsheet disaster and an angry executive. And Damien was laughing, really laughing, his head thrown back and his eyes crinkled at the corners. When he looked back at me, the laughter faded into something more intense. I shouldn't, he said quietly. Shouldn't what? This. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't pull away. The kiss was soft and sweet, and nothing like kissing Marcus. There was no urgency, no demand, just warmth and connection and the gentle crash of waves on the shore. When we broke apart, I was shaking. "I'm married," I whispered. "I know." "This is wrong." "I know." "I don't care." Damien cupped my face in his hands. "Claire, I need you to understand something. This isn't just attraction for me. I've been half in love with you since I saw your engagement photos and read the interview you did for the company newsletter. You talked about using data to save lives, about making healthcare accessible, and I thought, this woman is extraordinary. And then I met you, and you're even better than I imagined. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs at time. You can't say things like that. Why not? Because I'm vulnerable and confused, and your brother abandoned me on our honeymoon for another woman, and I can't tell if this is real or just revenge. It's real, Damien said firmly. And for the record, if Marcus weren't my brother, if you were just a woman I met on vacation, I'd still be falling for you. But he is my brother, and you are married, and I won't push you into anything you're not ready for. He stood, offering me his hand. Let's go back, he said. We can pretend this didn't happen. Or we can talk about what happens next. Your choice. I took his hand. We walked back to the resort in silence, our fingers intertwined. When we reached the path that split toward our respective bungalows, I stopped. I died, I said. Damien's eyes widened. What? In another life, another timeline. I don't know how to explain it, but I lived this before. I went back with Marcus when Sienna called. I spent 5 years in a miserable marriage, and then he killed me. Not on purpose. We were fighting. He pushed me. I fell, but I did. I expected him to look at me like I was insane. Instead, he just listened. When I woke up on my wedding day, I thought I was dreaming. But it was real. I was getting a second chance, and I decided I wasn't going to make the same mistakes. I met his eyes. Meeting you wasn't part of the plan, but maybe it was supposed to happen. Maybe this is why I came back. Damien was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I believe you. Just like that? Just like that. He squeezed my hand. I've seen enough impossible things in my life to know the universe doesn't follow rules, and if you say you lived before, that you died, that you came back, I believe you. Relief flooded through me. I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone to believe me. What do you want to do? Damien asked gently. I want to not go back to Marcus. I want to not spend the next 5 years being gaslit and ignored and slowly erased. My voice broke. I want to choose myself for once. Then choose yourself. It's not that simple. There's the marriage, the shared apartment, our families. I'll help you, Damien interrupted. Whatever you need, lawyers, money, a place to stay. I know this is complicated and I know it's not fair to you, but Claire, you don't have to do this alone. I started crying, not sad tears, but the overwhelming kind that came from being seen and supported and valued. Damien pulled me into his arms and held me while I sobbed into his expensive linen shirt. He didn't try to fix it or minimize it. He just held me. When I finally stopped, he said, Stay with me tonight. Just to sleep. You shouldn't be alone. I should have said no. It was too fast, too complicated. I said yes. His bungalow was nicer than mine, larger, with a private pool and a better view. We lay on his bed fully clothed, talking in the darkness about everything and nothing. He told me about his failed engagement 3 years ago, how his fiancée had left him for someone more exciting. I told him about my mother, who'd died when I was 16, and how Marcus had used my grief to make me dependent on him. He knew I was afraid of being alone, I whispered. He used it against me. You're not alone anymore, Damien said, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. I fell asleep there, safe and warm, and for the first time since my rebirth, hopeful. I woke to my phone buzzing. I'd forgotten to block Marcus on the resort phone. Claire, his voice was strained. We need to talk. I sat up, disoriented. Damien was in the shower. I could hear the water running. What is it, Marcus? I made a mistake. I shouldn't have left. Sienna is fine. It was just a panic attack, like you said. I want to come there. I booked a flight. I'll be there tomorrow. My blood turned to ice. No. What do you mean, no? I mean, don't come. I don't want you here. Claire, you're being ridiculous. I'm being honest. You made your choice, Marcus. You chose Sienna over me on our wedding night. You don't get to take it back just because you're bored or guilty. This isn't like you. No, I agreed. The old me would have forgiven you, would have been grateful you came back, but I'm not her anymore. What are you saying? The bathroom door opened. Damien emerged in a towel, his hair wet, concern in his eyes when he saw my expression. I made a decision. I'm saying I want a divorce. Silence, then. You're not serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Is there someone else? His voice was sharp with suspicion. Did you meet someone? I could have lied. Should have, probably. But I was done protecting Marcus's feelings. Yes. Who? The word was a roar. I looked at Damien. He shook his head slightly, a warning. But I was past warnings. Your brother. The explosion was immediate. Marcus screamed, cursed, called me every name in the book. Called Damien a snake, a backstabber, a manipulative bastard who'd been plotting this all along. I held the phone away from my ear and let him rage. When he finally ran out of breath, I said calmly, Damien didn't seduce me, Marcus. He was just here when you weren't. He listened when you wouldn't. He chose me when you chose Sienna. This is on you. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. No, I said. Marrying you was the biggest mistake. This is me fixing it. I hung up. Damien crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me into his arms. Are you okay? I think so. I was shaking, but it was adrenaline, not fear. He's going to make this hell. Let him try. Damien's voice was steel. I have better lawyers. This will destroy your relationship. We didn't have a relationship, and Claire, he tilted my chin up to meet his eyes. You're worth it. Whatever happens, you're worth it. I kissed him then, hard and desperate, trying to convey everything I couldn't say. He responded in kind, his hands tangling in my hair, his mouth claiming mine. When we broke apart, we were both breathless. I need to tell you something, Damien said, about why I'm really here. My stomach dropped. Okay. I didn't just book this resort as a wedding gift. I booked it because I was investigating Marcus. What? There have been some irregularities in his department. Expense reports that don't add up, client meetings that never happened. My CFO flagged it, and I've been looking into it quietly. Damien ran a hand through his wet hair. I thought maybe he was just sloppy. But the more I dug, the more it looked like embezzlement. I felt like I'd been punched. How much? About $200,000 over the past 18 months. I sank onto the bed. In my first life, Marcus had always been vague about money. We'd lived above our means, but he'd blamed it on business expenses and necessary networking. I'd never questioned it. Now I wondered what else I'd missed. Who knows? I asked. Just me and the CFO? I haven't told Dad yet. I wanted to be sure. And are you sure? I'm getting there. Damien sat beside me. Claire, I need you to know, this didn't start because I was investigating him. The investigation started because my CFO noticed the discrepancies, but once I started looking, I found other things, like the fact that Sienna works for one of our competitors. What? She's a junior analyst at CyberShield, has been for 2 years, and some of the clients Marcus has been billing for meetings are CyberShield clients. The implications hit me like a freight train. He's feeding her information. I can't prove it yet, but yes, I think so. Does he know you know? Not yet. Damien took my hand, but he will. I'm going to confront him when we get back. I'm going to give him a chance to come clean, or I'm going to the board. He'll blame you, say you fabricated it because of me. Probably, but I have evidence. Receipts, emails, meeting records. He can blame me all he wants, but the numbers don't lie. I thought about Marcus. Charming and careless and convinced the rules didn't apply to him. Of course he'd stolen from the family company. Of course he'd chosen Sienna over me. She was helping him betray Damien. He's going to lose everything, I said quietly. He deserves to lose everything. Damien's voice was hard. And he stole from us. He lied to our father, and he treated you like you were disposable. When were you going to tell me? I wasn't. Not until I had proof. I didn't want to poison your marriage based on suspicions. He looked away. But then I met you, and I realized you deserved to know the truth about who you married. Thank you, I said. For telling me, for trusting me. Claire, I need you to understand. If you go back to him, I can't protect you from what's coming. When this breaks, it's going to be ugly. Marcus will be fired, possibly prosecuted. There will be lawyers and investigations and media coverage. I'm not going back to him. You say that now. I'm not going back, I repeated firmly, boss. In my first life, I stayed. I let him gaslight me and manipulate me and slowly destroy who I was. I died because of him. I'm not giving him that power again. Damien studied my face. Whatever he saw there satisfied him because he nodded. Okay, then let's make a plan. We spent the next hour strategizing. I would file for divorce immediately, citing abandonment. Damien would expedite the investigation and present his findings to the board. We'd coordinate our timelines so Marcus couldn't claim the divorce was retaliation for the investigation. What about us? I asked as dawn broke over the ocean. What about us? If we're together, Marcus will use it against you. Say you seduced me to get revenge, that this whole investigation is personal. It is personal, Damien said bluntly. He's my brother, and I wish him no harm, but he's also a thief and a liar, and he hurt you, so yes, it's extremely personal. Damien, I don't care what Marcus thinks. I don't care what anyone thinks. I care about you, and I care about doing the right thing. He pulled me close. But I also know this is fast. Too fast, maybe. So here's what I propose. We finish this vacation. We figure out if this is real or just the heat of the moment. And when we get back, if you still want to do this, we do it right. Divorce first, then us. It was reasonable. Sensible. Everything Marcus wasn't. Okay, I agreed. But Damien, I already know it's real. His smile was like sunrise. Yeah. Me too. The rest of the week was surreal. We stayed in our separate bungalows to maintain appearances, but we spent every waking moment together. We snorkeled and sailed and explored the island. We talked about everything, our childhoods, our dreams, our fears. Damien told me about the pressure of running Chen Technologies, about his fractured relationship with his father, about his fear that he'd never find someone who loved him for himself rather than his money. I told him about my work, about the healthcare disparities I was trying to fix, about my dream of running my own nonprofit someday, about the loneliness of being with Marcus, of feeling like I was constantly performing to earn love that should have been freely given. You never have to perform for me, Damien said one night as we watched the stars from his private pool. You're enough exactly as you are. I cried. Again. Happy tears this time. On our last night, we made love for the first time. It was nothing like it had been with Marcus, frantic and desperate and always slightly selfish. With Damien, it was slow and reverent and mutual. He touched me like I was precious, kissed me like he was memorizing the taste of my lips. When I came apart in his arms, he held me through it, whispering my name like a prayer. Afterward, lying tangled in his sheets, I felt reborn in a way that had nothing to do with time travel. "I love you," I said into the darkness. "I love you too," he replied without hesitation. "I know it's too soon and I know it's complicated, but I love you. What are we going to do? We're going to go home. You're going to file for divorce. I'm going to present my findings to the board, and we're going to weather the storm together. And then I'm going to marry you," Damien said simply. "When enough time has passed and it won't hurt your case. I'm going to marry you and spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that you're loved." I kissed him, pouring everything I felt into it, gratitude and love and hope. We flew back together, sitting side by side in first class. Damien worked on his presentation while I drafted emails to divorce lawyers. It should have been depressing, planning the end of my marriage while beginning a new relationship. Instead, it felt like freedom. We landed at JFK and went our separate ways. Me to the apartment I'd shared with Marcus, him to his penthouse in Tribeca. The plan was to maintain distance until the legal proceedings began. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it. Half-unpacked boxes from our wedding, dishes in the sink, Marcus's gym bag by the door. It smelled stale and sad. I'd been back less than an hour when Marcus came home. He looked terrible, unshaven, rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. For a split second, I felt sorry for him. Then he opened his mouth. "We need to talk," he said coldly. "I have nothing to say to you." "Really?" "Because I have a lot to say to you." He threw his keys on the counter with a clatter. "You cheated on me. With my brother. On our honeymoon." "You abandoned me on our honeymoon for your ex-girlfriend," I shot back. "Don't talk to me about betrayal." Sienna was sick. Sienna is always sick when it's convenient for her, and you always choose her. So I chose someone who chose me. Damien doesn't love you. He's using you to get back at me. For what? For stealing from his company? Marcus went white. What? Did you think he didn't know? Damien has evidence, Marcus. Receipts, emails, everything. He knows you've been embezzling and feeding information to Sienna. That's a lie. Is it? Because I've seen the documents. I know about Cyber Shield. I know about the fake expenses. I know everything. Marcus's face cycled through shock, anger, and finally, fear. He can't prove anything. He can, and he will. You're done, Marcus. The board meeting is tomorrow. You vindictive bitch. He stepped toward me, his hands clenched into fists. I held my ground. I'd been here before in my first life. This was the moment he'd pushed me, the moment I'd died. But I wasn't that Claire anymore. Touch me and I scream, I said calmly. My phone is recording, and I've already sent copies to my lawyer and to Damien. You lay one hand on me and you go to jail. It was a bluff. I hadn't started recording. But Marcus didn't know that. He stopped, breathing hard. Get out, I said. This is my apartment. My name is on the lease. Get out and don't come back. We're married. Not for long. The divorce papers will be filed tomorrow. You have 24 hours to collect your things. After that, I'm changing the locks. You can't do this. I already have. I met his eyes. You chose Sienna. You chose to steal. You chose to lie. These are the consequences. For a long moment, we stared at each other. Then Marcus grabbed his keys and left, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. I sagged against the counter, my hands trembling. But I'd done it. I'd stood up to him. My phone rang. Damien. Are you okay? He asked without preamble. How did you know? I've been sitting in my car outside your building since we landed. I saw Marcus go in and I was about to come up when he left. What happened? I told him. When I finished, he was silent for a moment. I'm coming up, he said. Damien, we agreed to wait. I don't care. I'm not leaving you alone tonight. He was at my door 5 minutes later, looking rumpled and worried and absolutely perfect. Hi, I said. Hi. He pulled me into his arms. You're incredible, you know that? I'm terrified. You're allowed to be both. He stayed the night, holding me while I shook with delayed adrenaline. We didn't make love. This wasn't about desire. It was about safety and comfort and having someone in my corner. In the morning, we went to war. I filed for divorce, citing abandonment and irreconcilable differences. My lawyer, recommended by Damien but paid for by my own savings, was sharp and efficient. She immediately filed for a restraining order based on Marcus's aggressive behavior. Damien presented his findings to the Chen Technologies Board. The fallout was spectacular. Marcus denied everything, of course. He called Damien jealous, vindictive, obsessed with destroying him. He claimed the evidence was fabricated, that the investigation was retaliation for my affair. But the numbers didn't lie. The emails didn't lie. The timeline of meetings that never happened and expenses that couldn't be explained didn't lie. The board voted unanimously to terminate Marcus and pursue legal action. The media had a field day. Chen Technologies heir accused of embezzlement. Family feud rocks cybersecurity giant. Scorned wife partners with billionaire brother-in-law. That last one hurt, even though it was partially true. The tabloids painted me as either a gold digger who'd trapped Damien or a victim who'd been saved by a white knight. Neither narrative gave me agency. But I didn't care. Let them talk. Marcus fought the divorce viciously. He demanded alimony, claimed I'd isolated him from his family, accused me of infidelity. His lawyer was aggressive and mean, dragging out every proceeding, challenging every document. My lawyer was better. 6 months later, I was free. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in May. I walked out of the courthouse into the spring sunshine and burst into tears. Damien was waiting by his car. He'd attended every hearing, every deposition, sitting in the gallery in silent support. Now he opened his arms and I ran to him. It's over, I sobbed into his shirt. It's over, he confirmed. You're free. What happens now? He pulled back to look at me, his eyes warm. Now we start our life. We dated properly for a year. Dinners and movies and weekend trips. Meeting each other's friends and families. Slow and steady and real. Damien's father was skeptical at first, worried that I'd manipulated both his sons. But when he saw how Damien looked at me, how happy we were together, he came around. He even apologized for Marcus's behavior and thanked me for bringing his eldest son. Back to the family. My father, who'd never liked Marcus, adored Damien. This one has a spine, he told me approvingly. And he looks at you like you hung the moon. Marcus disappeared. After the criminal charges were filed, he plea bargained down to probation and restitution. He was ordered to pay back the money he'd stolen and banned from working in tech for 5 years. Last I heard, he'd moved to California with Sienna. They were reportedly broke and miserable. I didn't feel bad for him. A year and a half after my divorce was finalized, Damien proposed. We were back in the Maldives, the same resort, the same beach where we'd first kissed. I know this place has complicated memories, he said as he knelt in the sand. But it's also where I found you, where we found each other, and I want to replace the bad memories with good ones. The ring was a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, my favorite color. Claire, you're the bravest, strongest, most incredible person I've ever met. You've been through hell and come out the other side with grace and kindness intact. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. Will you marry me? Yes, I had through tears. Yes. We married 6 months later in a small ceremony with just our closest friends and family. No drama, no exes, no emergencies. Just love and laughter and promises we both intended to keep. On our wedding night, lying in Damien's arms in the honeymoon suite of the Maldives resort, I thought about my first life. About the Claire who'd died alone and afraid in a bathtub, who'd spent 5 years being slowly erased. Thank you, I whispered. For what? Damien asked sleepily. For seeing me. For choosing me. For being exactly who you are. He kissed my forehead. Thank you for giving me a second chance. A second chance. At love. At family. At happiness. He pulled me closer. I know we met under weird circumstances, and I know people will always wonder if this was just revenge against Marcus. But Claire, you have to know, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. Marcus didn't lose you. I found you. I kissed him then, pouring all my love and gratitude into it. I'd died once and been given the gift of rebirth. I'd used that gift to save myself, to choose differently, to forge a new path, and that path had led me here, to a man who loved me unconditionally, who supported my dreams, who treated me like an equal partner. Marcus had canceled our honeymoon for Sienna's emergency. I'd gone alone and met his richer brother, and I'd never been happier. The irony wasn't lost on me. In my first life, I'd spent 5 years trying to be enough for Marcus. Thinner, prettier, more accommodating, less demanding. I'd twisted myself into knots trying to earn love that should have been freely given. With Damien, I didn't have to try. I could be messy and emotional and ambitious and flawed, and he loved me anyway. More than anyway, he loved me because of those things, not despite them. 2 years into our marriage, I launched my nonprofit, Healthcare for All, focused on data-driven solutions to healthcare accessibility. Damien funded the startup costs and served on the board, but the vision and execution were mine. We were featured in Forbes. Power couple uses tech and data to revolutionize healthcare access. The article mentioned my previous marriage to Marcus only in passing. It focused instead on my work, my vision, my impact. I'd finally become more than someone's wife. I was Claire Chen, nonprofit founder. Claire Chen, healthcare advocate. Claire Chen, person who mattered. Marcus sent a bitter email when the article came out. Subject line, congratulations. Body, I see you've done well for yourself. Funny how easy success is when you marry money. I hope you and Damien are very happy together. I hope you don't regret destroying our family. I deleted it without responding. You okay? Damien asked, seeing my expression. Yeah, I closed my laptop. Just Marcus being Marcus. Want me to have legal send another cease and desist? No, he's not worth the energy. Damien pulled me into his lap, nuzzling my neck. I love that you've stopped letting him live rent-free in your head. I have a better tenant now, I teased, tapping his forehead. He laughed and kissed me. That night, lying in bed in the penthouse we'd bought together, I thought about the two timelines, the life I'd lived and the life I was living. In the first timeline, I'd died at 31, drowned in a bathtub after a fight about Marcus's latest affair. The coroner had ruled it accidental. Marcus had cried at my funeral and married Sienna 6 months later. In this timeline, I was 32 and thriving, married to a man who worshipped me, running an organization that was making a real difference, surrounded by friends and family who actually cared about my well-being. The rebirth had been a gift, but I was the one who'd chosen to use it. I could have gone back to Marcus, tried to fix our marriage, convinced myself that knowing the future meant I could change him. Instead, I'd chosen to change my own path. I'd chosen me. And in doing so, I'd found something I'd never had in my first life: genuine happiness. What are you thinking about? Damien murmured, his hand tracing lazy circles on my back. Just how lucky I am. I'm the lucky one. We can both be lucky. He laughed softly. Deal. I fell asleep in his arms, safe and loved and free. And somewhere in the multiverse, I like to think the first Claire was at peace. That she could see this life I'd built and know that her death hadn't been for nothing. She'd given me the chance to choose differently, and I'd chosen well. 5 years after the divorce, I got a wedding invitation. Marcus and Sienna were getting married. I stared at the cream-colored cardstock, ornate script announcing their destination wedding in Cancun. You've got to be kidding. Me, I muttered. Damien looked over my shoulder. Is that An invitation to Marcus's wedding, to Sienna. Are you going to go? Absolutely not. I tossed it in the recycling. Why would I want to watch my ex-husband marry the woman he cheated with? Closure, Damien suggested. I have closure. I have an amazing husband, a successful nonprofit, and zero desire to waste a weekend watching Marcus make another mistake. But the invitation bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Not because I still had feelings for Marcus, I didn't, but because it brought back memories of my first life, of the future I'd avoided. In that timeline, Marcus had married Sienna after my death. They'd been divorced within 3 years. Sienna had gotten bored once the money from my life insurance ran out and Marcus's career stalled. She'd left him for a plastic surgeon with better prospects. Marcus had died alone, estranged from his family, working a dead-end job and drowning in debt. I knew this because I'd seen it, somehow, in those strange moments between death and rebirth. Like watching a movie of a life that hadn't happened yet. You're thinking about your first life, Damien said quietly. It wasn't a question. How do you always know? You get this look. Distant, sad. He pulled me close. Talk to me. So I told him about what I'd seen, about Marcus's trajectory, his isolation, his pathetic end. Do you feel bad for him? Damien asked. I considered this. I feel bad for the Marcus that could have been. The one who might have chosen differently if he'd been capable of seeing past his own ego. But the Marcus that exists? No, he made his choices. He's still making them, Damien agreed. Marrying Sienna after everything she's done, that's not love, that's desperation. I hope they are happy, I said and meant it. I hope they've both grown and changed and learned from their mistakes. But you don't think they have? No. 2 months later, my prediction proved correct. The wedding was called off 3 weeks before the ceremony. Sienna had been caught in bed with her personal trainer. Marcus was devastated, publicly humiliated, and once again single. He called me drunk at 2 a.m. Claire, he slurred. Claire, I made a mistake. The biggest mistake. I should have chosen you. I hung up and blocked his number, again. Marcus? Damien asked, rolling over. Drunk and pathetic. The wedding's off. Good for Sienna's would-be husband. I laughed despite myself. You're terrible. I'm honest. He pulled me back down to the bed. Claire, I need to tell you something. Okay. Marcus reached out to Dad. He wants to come back to the company. Says he's changed. He's learned his lesson. He deserves a second chance. My stomach dropped. What did your dad say? He asked my opinion. And? I said no. Damien's voice was firm. Marcus stole from us. He betrayed our trust. And he's shown no real remorse or change. Calling you drunk and crying about his failed engagement isn't growth, it's self-pity. Your dad agreed? He agreed. Marcus is out permanently. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. Do you ever wonder if we're being too hard on him? I asked. No. Damien cupped my face. Claire, you can be kind without setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You can forgive without forgetting, and you can move on without feeling guilty. I don't feel guilty. You feel something, otherwise you wouldn't be asking. He was right. I did feel something. Not guilt exactly, but a kind of survivor's remorse. I'd been given a second chance, and I'd used it to build a beautiful life. Marcus hadn't gotten that chance. He was still making the same mistakes, still trapped in the same patterns. I can feel bad about the waste of his potential without wanting to save him, I said slowly. Exactly. You can witness his struggles without making them your responsibility. I kissed him gratefully. When did you get so wise? When I fell in love with a woman who taught me that kindness and boundaries can coexist. 7 years after my rebirth, Healthcare for All opened its 50th clinic. We'd expanded from data analysis to actual service provision, offering free and low-cost healthcare to underserved communities across the country. I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony flanked by Damien and my team and felt a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with anyone else's validation. This was mine. I'd built this. Me. The local news covered the event. The reporter asked about my inspiration. I almost died once, I said, the words coming easier now. And when I survived, I realized I'd been living for everyone else, trying to be who they needed me to be instead of who I was. This organization is about giving people access to care so they can live fully, authentically, without fear. It's personal for me. The segment aired that night. My phone exploded with congratulatory messages, and one message from a number I didn't recognize. I saw you on the news. You look happy. I'm glad. I'm sorry for everything. M. I showed it to Damien. Are you going to respond? He asked. No, but I'm not going to block it either. Why not? Because maybe someday he'll actually mean it. And maybe I'll be ready to accept his apology without it meaning anything more than that. And if he never means it, then I've lost nothing by leaving the door open an inch. Damien kissed my temple. You're a better person than I am. No, I just have less to prove. 10 years after my rebirth, I got pregnant. It was unexpected. We'd been trying on and off, but my doctor had warned that stress and age might make it difficult. I'd made peace with the possibility of not having children, but there I was, staring at 2 pink lines and crying in the bathroom of our penthouse. Damien found me there, mascara streaked and clutching the test. Is that, we're having a baby, I sobbed. He picked me up and spun me around, both of us laughing and crying and completely overwhelmed. Our daughter was born on a snowy January evening. She had Damien's dark eyes and my stubborn chin. We named her Maya after my mother. Holding her in the hospital, feeling her tiny heartbeat against my chest, I thought about the Claire who'd died in that bathtub, the one who'd never gotten to experience this joy. Thank you, I whispered to the ceiling, to the universe, to whatever force had given me this second chance. Thank you for letting me live. Did you say something? Damien asked, looking up from where he was texting birth announcements. Just talking to Maya. He came over, wrapping his arms around both of us. She's perfect. You're perfect. This is perfect. And it was. When Maya was 6 months old, we ran into Marcus at a coffee shop. It was awkward and unavoidable. He was in line ahead of us, looking older and thinner than I remembered. His hair was graying at the temples, and he had the worn look of someone who'd been through it. Claire, he said, his voice uncertain. Damien. Marcus. Damien's tone was neutral. I heard, congratulations, on the baby. Marcus's eyes flicked to Maya in her carrier, and something complicated crossed his face. She's beautiful. Thank you, I said carefully. An awkward silence. Then Marcus said, I'm sober now, 6 months. AA, therapy, the whole thing. That's good, I said, and meant it. I'm happy for you. I wanted to apologize for everything, for the wedding, for Sienna, for the way I treated you. You deserved better. I know. It came out harsher than I intended, but it was true. I did know. I'd known for 10 years. Marcus flinched but nodded. Yeah, you did. He looked at Damien. And I owe you an apology too. For the things I said, for the accusations. You were right about everything, the embezzlement, Sienna, all of it. I was an idiot. Yes, Damien said simply. You were. Another silence. I should go, Marcus said. But Claire, I really am glad you're happy, and I really am sorry. He left before I could respond. Are you okay? Damien asked. Yeah. I looked down at Maya, who was sleeping peacefully through the whole encounter. Yeah, I'm okay. Did you believe him about being sorry? I think he's sorry his life didn't turn out the way he wanted. Whether that's the same as being sorry for hurting me, I don't know. Does it matter? No. I smiled. It really doesn't. We got our coffee and went home, and I didn't think about Marcus again for months. On Maya's first birthday, we threw a party at our penthouse. Friends, family, colleagues from both Chen Technologies and Healthcare for All. It was loud and chaotic and perfect. Late in the evening, after most guests had left, I found myself on the balcony with Damien's father. "She's a lucky girl," he said, watching Maya toddle around the living room with Damien in pursuit. "To have parents who love each other like you two do? We're the lucky ones," I corrected. "I wanted to thank you," he said suddenly, "for what you did for this family." "I didn't do anything. You saved Damien. Before you, he was married to his work, closed off, alone. He's a different person now, happier, more complete." The old man's eyes were misty. "And you saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life." "What mistake?" "I was going to leave the company to Marcus, not the CEO position, but the controlling stake. I thought blood should come first, thought Damien would understand." He shook his head. "But watching how Marcus treated you, seeing his choices, I realized he didn't have the character to lead this family or this company. You helped me see that." "I think you saw it yourself," I said gently. "Maybe, but you made it clear." He squeezed my hand. "You're good for both my sons. One you saved from his worst self. The other you taught to love again. Thank you." I hugged him, this man who'd become the father I'd lost when mine passed away 2 years ago. "Thank you for raising the man I love," I whispered. Inside, Damien caught my eye and smiled. Maya was asleep on his shoulder, her curly hair a mess, her face peaceful. This was my life now. Not perfect. We had our fights and challenges and difficult days. But real, honest, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine love. I'd been given a second chance, and I'd used it well. 15 years after my rebirth, I stood at a podium accepting the Forbes Healthcare Innovation Award. When I was younger, I said to the assembled crowd of industry leaders and philanthropists, I thought happiness was about making other people happy, about being who they needed me to be. I twisted myself into knots trying to earn love and validation. I caught Damien's eye in the front row. He was beaming with pride. But then something changed. I realized that I couldn't help anyone if I didn't help myself first, that I couldn't make a difference in the world if I was slowly disappearing in my own life. Maya, now 5 years old, was sitting on her grandfather's lap, watching me with wide eyes. Healthcare for All exists because I decided to stop living for others and start living for myself. And in doing that, I found I could help more people than I ever imagined. So my advice to anyone listening, especially women who've been taught to minimize themselves, is this: choose yourself. Fight for yourself. Because when you're whole and healthy and fully yourself, that's when you can truly change the world. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, surrounded by congratulations and networking requests, I snuck away to the bathroom to catch my breath. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "I saw your speech. I'm proud of you. You've become everything I never let you be. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. Marcus." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, "Thank you. I hope you find your peace too." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it wasn't hate either. It was just closure. Damien found me in the hallway. "There you are. People are asking for you." "Sorry, just needed a minute." "Was it overwhelming? We can leave if you want." "No." I took his hand. "I'm ready." We walked back into the ballroom together, and I spent the rest of the night talking about my work, my vision, my plans for the future. I was Claire Chen, Not Marcus's ex-wife. Not even Damien's wife, though I loved being that. I was myself, fully, completely, unapologetically, and I'd never been happier. 20 years after my rebirth, I published a memoir. The title, Choosing Life, How I Died, Came Back, and Built the Future I Deserved. My publisher had been skeptical about the rebirth aspect. People will think you're crazy, they warned, but I didn't care. It was my truth. The book was part self-help, part cautionary tale, part love story. I wrote about my first life, about Marcus and the slow erosion of self. I wrote about drowning, about waking up with a second chance, about choosing differently. I wrote about Damien, about Maya, about healthcare for all. And I wrote about the lessons I'd learned, that you can't love someone into loving you back, that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival, that the life you're living isn't the only life available to you. The book became a bestseller. I did a book tour speaking to auditoriums full of people who'd felt trapped in their own lives, women especially who'd spent years being who everyone else needed them to be. It doesn't take dying to change your life, I told them. It just takes choosing. Every day you wake up and you choose. Do I live for myself or for everyone else? Do I accept what I've been given or fight for what I deserve? The emails poured in, thousands of them. People telling me I'd inspired them to leave bad relationships, change careers, set boundaries, pursue dreams. I read every single one. Marcus never contacted me about the book, though I knew he must have seen it. His name wasn't in it. I'd called him M to protect his privacy. But anyone who knew our story would recognize him. I wondered sometimes how he felt seeing our marriage dissected in print, seeing himself cast as the villain in someone else's story. But mostly, I didn't think about him at all. 25 years after my rebirth, Damien and I renewed our vows. We went back to the Maldives, to the same resort where we'd met. Maya, now 15 and wise beyond her years, officiated. "Mom and Dad," she said, grinning as we stood barefoot in the sand, "you've shown me what love looks like, not the fairy tale kind, but the real kind, where you choose each other every day, where you fight for each other, where you grow together instead of apart." I was crying before she finished. "Dad, you've taught me that being strong means being vulnerable, that being successful means being kind." Damien was crying too. "Mom, you've taught me that choosing myself isn't selfish, that my dreams matter, that I don't have to dim my light to make others comfortable." Maya looked at both of us. "Do you, Damien Chen, take Claire to be your wife? Again? For another lifetime of love and laughter and maybe a little chaos?" "I do," Damien said, his voice thick with emotion. "And do you, Claire Chen, take Damien to be your husband again, for all the adventures still to come?" "I do," I said. "Then by the power vested in me by the internet, I now pronounce you still married. You may kiss. Again." We did. And standing there with the ocean breeze in my hair and my family surrounding me, I thought about the Claire who died in that bathtub so long ago. I hoped she could see this. Hoped she knew that her death hadn't been in vain. She'd given me the greatest gift, a second chance. And I'd used it to build a life worth living. That night, lying in bed with Damien, I said, "Do you ever wish you could go back? Tell your younger self what's coming?" "No," he said immediately, "Pia, because I might change something that would mean I don't meet you." Even knowing about Marcus? About the investigation and the family drama? Even then, every step led me to you. I wouldn't change a thing. I kissed him. "I love you. I love you more." Impossible. Want to bet? We made love like we were 25 instead of 50, like we had all the time in the world. And maybe we did. 30 years after my rebirth, I was 61 years old. Healthcare for all had expanded internationally. Maya was running the day-to-day operations while I served as founder emeritus. I spent my time writing, speaking, and mentoring young women in healthcare and business. Damien had retired from Chen Technologies, handing the reins to a successor he'd been grooming for years. We split our time between New York and a small house in Maine where we could watch the ocean and pretend to relax. One morning, I woke to find a letter on my nightstand. Not an email, an actual handwritten letter. The return address was a hospice facility in California. I opened it with shaking hands. Dear Claire, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you'll care, but I needed to write it anyway. I'm dying. Liver failure, the doctors say. Too many years of drinking, of poor choices, of refusing to deal with my problems. I'm not writing to make you feel bad. You don't owe me anything. Not sympathy, not forgiveness, nothing. I'm writing because I need you to know that you were right. About everything. You were right to leave me. Right to choose Damien. Right to build the life you built. I spent 30 years being bitter about it. 30 years telling myself that you were the villain, that Damien stole you, that I was the victim. But I wasn't the victim. I was the problem. I chose Sienna over you. I chose my ego over our marriage. I chose comfort over growth, lies over truth, cowardice over courage, and I lost you. I lost everything, actually. Sienna left me years ago. My dad died without forgiving me. I never built anything that mattered. But you built an empire. You changed lives. You became exactly who you were meant to be. And I'm glad. I really am. I know it's too little, too late. I know this letter can't undo the damage I did. But I needed to tell you I'm sorry. For the wedding, for Sienna, for every time I made you feel small or unimportant or less than. You deserved better than me. I hope you're happy. I hope Damien treats you the way I should have. I hope your daughter knows how lucky she is. And I really hope that you don't regret the time we had together. That it wasn't all bad. That I wasn't completely worthless. I'm sorry, Marcus. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Damien found me on the porch, the letter clutched in my hand. What is it? He asked, alarmed. I handed him the letter. He read it in silence, his expression unreadable. He's dying, I said when he finished. I know. Damien sat beside me. His social worker called me last week, asked if we wanted to visit. I said I'd talk to you. You knew and didn't tell me? I was going to, but I wanted to figure out the right way. I looked out at the ocean, trying to process. Do you want to go? Damien asked gently. I don't know. I wiped my eyes. Part of me wants to tell him to rot, that he doesn't get deathbed redemption after 30 years of being awful. And the other part? The other part remembers that he was my first love, that there were good times mixed in with the bad, that he's Damien's brother and maybe I owe it to both of you to let there be peace. You don't owe me anything, Damien said firmly, and you definitely don't owe Marcus. If you want to go, go for yourself, but don't do it out of obligation. I thought about it for the rest of the day. That night, I made my decision. I want to go, I told Damien. Not for Marcus. For me. For closure. We flew to California the next morning. The hospice was clean and quiet, filled with the antiseptic smell of hospitals and the heavy weight of impending death. Marcus was in room 214. I almost didn't recognize him. The man in the bed was gaunt and gray, hooked up to machines and monitors. His hair was completely white, his face deeply lined, but his eyes were still Marcus's. Claire, he breathed, trying to sit up. You came. I came. I sat in the chair beside his bed, my hands folded in my lap. Damien stood by the door, present but giving us space. I didn't think you would. I didn't think I would either. Marcus looked at me for a long moment. You're still beautiful. Don't. Sorry, force of habit. He managed a weak smile. Thank you for coming. For reading my letter. For everything. I didn't come to forgive you, I said bluntly. I'm not sure I can. You hurt me badly, Marcus. And it took me a long time to recover from that. I know. But I came because I wanted you to know that I've made peace with it. With what happened between us. It doesn't haunt me anymore. Good. Tears were running down his face. Good. That's all I wanted. For you to be free of me. I am. I confirmed. I have been for a long time. We sat in silence for a while. Then Marcus said, "Can I ask you something?" Okay. The rebirth thing in your book, was that real or a metaphor? I glanced at Damien, who shrugged. It was real, I said quietly. I died, Marcus, in another timeline. You pushed me during a fight and I hit my head and drowned in our bathtub. Marcus went white. That's not. I would never. You did. Not on purpose, but you did. And then I woke up on our wedding day with a second chance. So you knew, he whispered. When I canceled the honeymoon, you knew what would happen. I knew. And you changed it. I changed everything. Marcus closed his eyes. I'm glad. I'm glad you got to live. I'm glad it wasn't. That I didn't. You didn't, I said firmly. In this timeline, you didn't. You just made bad choices. And I've made better ones. The best one being Damien? I looked back at my husband, who smiled at me. Yes, I agreed. The best one being Damien. Marcus looked at his brother. I was jealous of you my whole life. Did you know that? I suspected, Damien said dryly. You were smarter, more successful, more everything, and I hated you for it. Marcus's voice broke. But you were also a better man. You deserved her. I didn't. No, Damien agreed. You didn't. It should have been cruel, but there was no malice in Damien's voice, just truth. Marcus laughed weakly. I appreciate your honesty, if nothing else. We stayed for an hour. We didn't talk about the past much. There was no point relitigating old wounds. Instead, we talked about small things. The weather, books, Maya. When it was time to leave, Marcus grabbed my hand. Thank you, he said, for the life you lived, for being exactly who you were meant to be, even if I wasn't part of it. Thank you, I said, for letting me go. He died 3 days later. Damien and I attended the funeral. It was small, just a handful of people. Some old friends, a couple of distant relatives, the social worker from the hospice. Sienna wasn't there. I didn't ask why. At the graveside, the officiant invited people to share memories. No one spoke. Finally, I stood. Marcus was complicated, I said. He made mistakes, big ones. He hurt people. He hurt me. I saw Damien tense, but I continued. But he was also capable of love, even if he didn't always know how to show it. He was charming and funny and, when he wanted to be, incredibly kind. He deserved better than he gave himself. I paused. I hope he's at peace now. I hope he's free of whatever demons haunted him. And I hope, wherever he is, he knows that I don't hate him, that I've forgiven him even if I couldn't forget. It wasn't quite true. I wasn't sure I had forgiven him, not completely, but it felt like the right thing to say. After the funeral, Damien and I drove to the coast and sat on the beach, watching the waves. Are you okay? He asked. Yeah, I leaned against him. I think I am. Do you regret going? No, I needed to see him to close that chapter. And is it closed? I thought about Marcus, about both versions of him. The one who'd killed me and the one who'd died apologizing. Yes, I said finally. It's closed. We sat there until sunset, my hand in Damien's, the ocean eternal and unchanging before us. And when we finally stood to leave, I felt lighter than I had in years. I was free. Truly, completely free. 35 years after my rebirth, I was 66 years old and considering retirement. Healthcare for all was thriving under Maya's leadership. She'd expanded it in ways I'd never imagined, partnering with governments and NGOs to bring quality healthcare to underserved populations worldwide. I was so proud of her, I could burst. Mom, she said one day over lunch, I want you to know you taught me everything that matters. Your dad helped, I protested. Dad taught me about business. You taught me about purpose. She squeezed my hand. You taught me that success isn't about money or status. It's about impact, about making a difference. You've made a difference, I said, tears in my eyes. A huge one. Because you showed me how. That night, I told Damien I was ready to step back completely. Are you sure? He asked. I'm sure. I've done what I came back to do. I built something that matters. I raised an incredible daughter. I lived a life I'm proud of. I kissed him. Now I want to just be with you. Travel, read, garden, whatever old people do. We're not old, he protested. We're not young either. Fair point. We spent the next year traveling, Europe, Asia, South America. We saw museums and monuments and natural wonders. We ate amazing food and met incredible people. And everywhere we went, I thought about the Claire who'd died at 31, who'd never gotten to see the world, to experience joy, to grow old with someone she loved. I wish she could see this, I told Damien one night in Paris. Who? The other me, the first one. I wish she knew it gets better. Maybe she does, Damien said. Maybe she's watching through you. I liked that idea. 40 years after my rebirth, I turned 71. We threw a party, family and friends, colleagues and mentees. Maya gave a speech that made me cry. Damien read a poem he'd written about growing old together. Late in the evening, I found myself alone on the balcony of our apartment, looking out at the city lights. Damien said, joining me. People are asking for you. I just needed a minute. I leaned against him. 40 years. Can you believe it? 40 years since you came back? 40 years since I chose differently. I looked up at him. 40 years since I met you. Best decision you ever made. Definitely top 5. He laughed and kissed me. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't gone to the Maldives? He asked. If you'd stayed home with Marcus? Sometimes, I admitted. But I try not to. That path leads to madness. What do you think would have happened? I thought about my first life. About the slow death of self. The final violent end. I think I would have died, I said simply. Maybe not the same way. But I would have died, if not physically, then spiritually. I would have become a ghost in my own life. And instead, I became fully alive. I turned to face him. I became myself, the person I was always meant to be. I love who you became, Damien said. I love who you are. I love you too. We stood there, holding each other as the party continued inside. And I thought about the journey, from death to rebirth, from Marcus to Damien, from victim to survivor to thriver. It hadn't been easy. There had been pain and setbacks and moments of doubt. But it had been worth it, every single moment. 45 years after my rebirth, Damien got sick. It started small, fatigue, minor aches. We blamed age, but it was cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave him 6 months. He lasted 8. I held his hand as he died, whispering all the things we'd said to each other 1,000 times before. I love you. You're my everything. I'll never forget you. Claire, he whispered at the end, promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll keep living. Not just existing. Living. Fully. The way you've taught everyone else to live. I promise. He smiled. Good. Because I'll be watching, and I expect great things. Then he was gone. The grief was crushing. Even knowing it was coming, even having time to prepare, nothing could have prepared me for the reality of losing him. I'd had 45 years with Damien, 45 years of love and laughter and partnership. It still wasn't enough. Maya held me while I cried. Friends brought food I couldn't eat. Colleagues sent flowers I didn't see. I went through the motions, funeral, burial, memorial service. I accepted condolences and hugs and well-meaning advice. But inside, I was hollow. I'd already died once. I knew what it felt like. This was worse. 6 months after Damien's death, I was sitting in our house in Maine staring at the ocean when Maya called. "Mom, I'm worried about you." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You haven't left the house in weeks." "I'm grieving." "You're drowning." Her voice was firm. "And Dad made you promise to keep living." "I am living." "No, you're existing. There's a difference." She was right. I knew she was right. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, tiredly. "Come stay with me for a while. Meet your grandchildren. Help with the organization. Do something other than sit and stare at the ocean." "Maya, please, Mom, for me, for Dad." So I went, and slowly, painfully, I started to heal. I played with my grandchildren. Maya had 3 now, ranging from 2 to 10. I went to Healthcare for All and mentored new staff. I started writing again. 6 months became a year became 2, and one day I woke up and realized I wanted to live again. Not just for Maya or for Damien's memory, for me. 50 years after my rebirth, I turned 81. I'd lived longer in this life than I had in my first and second combined. I'd seen my daughter grow into an incredible leader. I'd watched my grandchildren become their own people. I'd built something that would outlive me, and I'd loved and been loved by an extraordinary man. I thought about writing another book. After the After, Living Fully After Loss. But in the end, I decided against it. Some stories were too personal to share. Instead, I focused on living, the way Damien had made me promise. I traveled with Maya and her family. I volunteered at local clinics. I gardened and read and took long walks on the beach. And every night, I talked to Damien. I told him about my day, about the grandchildren, about the sunset. I told him I missed him and loved him and couldn't wait to see him again. I didn't know if he could hear me. But it made me feel less alone. 55 years after my rebirth, I got sick. It was sudden, a stroke that left me partially paralyzed and in need of constant care. Maya moved me into her house. She hired nurses and therapists. She rearranged her whole life to take care of me. "You don't have to do this," I told her. "Yes, I do," she said firmly. "You gave me life twice, once when you birthed me, and again when you chose to live instead of die. This is the least I can do." The paralysis was frustrating. My mind was sharp, but my body wouldn't cooperate. But I was surrounded by love. Maya and her family, friends who visited, colleagues who called. I wasn't alone. 60 years after my rebirth, I turned 91. I knew I was dying. I could feel it, the way my first death had felt, a kind of certainty. Maya knew too. I could see it in her eyes. "It's okay," I told her one evening. "I'm ready." "I'm not. You don't have to be, but I've lived a good life, sweetheart, a full life. I've done everything I came back to do." "What did you come back to do?" she asked. "To live. Really live. To make a difference. To love and be loved." I squeezed her hand as hard as my weak grip would allow. "I did all of that. I have no regrets." "None?" "None." "Not even Marcus?" I thought about that, about my first husband, my first life, the path not taken. "No," I said. "Ma, not even Marcus. He was part of my journey. A painful part, but necessary." "And Dad? Your father was the best thing that ever happened to me, next to you." I smiled. "I'm going to see him soon." "Mom, it's okay, Maya. I'm not afraid. I've done this before, remember?" She laughed through her tears. That night, lying in bed, I felt it. The same pull I'd felt 60 years ago. The sense of something waiting, something beyond. But this time, I wasn't fighting it. I thought about my lives, all of them. The one where I died young, the one where I'd been reborn and changed everything. I thought about Marcus and Damien, about Maya and my grandchildren. I thought about healthcare for all and the millions of lives it had touched. I thought about the woman I'd been and the woman I'd become. And I felt proud. I'd been given a second chance and I'd used it well. I'd lived fully, loved deeply, made a difference. What more could anyone ask for? As I closed my eyes for the last time, I felt Damien's presence beside me. Ready? He asked, holding out his hand. Ready, I confirmed, taking it, and together we stepped into whatever came next.